What if everything you thought you knew about television was wrong? What if that innocent black box sitting in your living room wasn't just entertainment, but something far more sinister and far more powerful? What if television was never meant to simply show you programs, but to program you? Right now, as you watch this video, millions of people around the world are sitting in darkened rooms, eyes fixed on glowing screens, absorbing carefully crafted images and narratives that are reshaping their thoughts, beliefs and behaviors in ways they never consciously agreed to. They think they're being entertained. They have no idea they're participating in the largest ritual working in human history. This isn't conspiracy theory. This isn't science fiction. This is the hidden reality of how television actually works, and why the most powerful occultists and consciousness researchers of our time have recognized it as something unprecedented in human civilization. A technological oracle that doesn't just predict the future, but actively creates it. In March 2001, a television show depicted terrorists crashing a hijacked plane into the World Trade Center. 6 months later, it happened exactly as shown. Coincidence or something much stranger? How did The Simpsons predict smartwatches, Disney buying Fox and Trump's presidency decades before they occurred? Why do so many fictional scenarios seem to manifest in reality with disturbing accuracy? The answers lie in understanding television's true function, not as a passive entertainment medium, but as an active consciousness-shaping technology that operates according to principles that ancient magicians and modern neuroscientists are only beginning to understand. We're about to explore how your television set became a technological altar, how programming literally programs your mind, and why the most dangerous magic might be the kind that doesn't look like magic at all. By the time this video ends, you'll never look at television the same way again. You'll understand why researchers have called it a form of artificial telepathy, and why what you think is harmless entertainment might actually be the most sophisticated mind control technology ever developed. But first, let me ask you something. When you arrange your furniture around your television, when you gather with family and friends to watch the same show at the same time, when you find yourself emotionally invested in fictional characters and their problems, what exactly do you think you're doing? Because according to anthropologists who study ritual behavior, you're doing something that would have been instantly recognizable to practitioners of ancient mystery religions. You're worshipping at a technological altar, and that altar is speaking back. When television sets first began appearing in American homes in the 1940s and 50s, they weren't simply placed randomly in rooms. Almost instinctively, families arranged their furniture in a semicircle around the glowing screen, creating what anthropologists would recognize as a classic ritual space. The television became the focal point, the altar around which the domestic congregation gathered for their nightly communion with the wider world. This arrangement wasn't accidental. The television set, with its cathode ray tube casting beams of light into darkened rooms, created what media theorist Marshall McLuhan would later describe as a tribal campfire, a gathering point that synchronized the attention and consciousness of all present. But unlike the ancient campfires around which our ancestors shared stories and wisdom, this new flame was controlled by distant corporations and government agencies, broadcasting carefully crafted narratives to millions of homes simultaneously. The very act of watching television involves a form of sensory deprivation that mimics ancient divination practices. Viewers sit in darkened rooms, their normal sensory input reduced, their attention focused on a single point of light. In this state, the conscious mind becomes more receptive to suggestion, while the critical faculties that might normally question or analyze information are diminished. Neurological studies have shown that television watching produces brainwave patterns similar to those found in light hypnotic states, a condition that practitioners of the occult arts have long recognized as ideal for implanting suggestions deep within the subconscious mind. To understand how television functions as a tool of mass ritual, we must first examine what ritual actually accomplishes. At its core, ritual serves to synchronize the consciousness of participants, creating a shared reality that extends beyond the individual mind. Through repetition, symbolism, and collective focus, ritual transforms abstract concepts into felt realities, making the invisible visible and the impossible possible. Television operates according to these same principles, but on a scale previously unimaginable in human history. When millions of people simultaneously watch the same program, they are participating in a massive ritual working, a collective focusing of attention and emotional energy that can shape not only individual beliefs, but the very fabric of consensus reality itself. Consider the phenomenon of appointment television. Those cultural moments where nearly everyone in a society watches the same event at the same time. The moon landing, presidential debates, season finales of popular shows, major sporting events. These broadcasts function as society-wide rituals, creating shared memories and collective experiences that bind communities together across vast distances. In these moments, television transcends its role as mere entertainment and becomes something approaching a technological god, speaking to its worshippers in unison. The ritual nature of television becomes even more apparent when we examine the repetitive structures that govern programming. News broadcasts follow rigid formats, with their familiar anchors, standardized graphics, and predictable pacing. Sitcoms adhere to precise timing structures, with laugh tracks that train audiences when to respond emotionally. Even commercial breaks occur at mathematically determined intervals, creating a rhythmic pulse that conditions viewers' attention spans and expectations. This repetitive structure serves a purpose beyond mere convenience. It creates what psychologists call entrainment, the synchronization of biological and psychological rhythms with external stimuli. Just as ancient ritual drummers used repetitive beats to induce altered states of consciousness, television programming uses repetitive structures to entrain viewers' brainwaves, making them more susceptible to the messages being transmitted. Perhaps no aspect of television's occult function has generated more speculation and controversy than the concept of predictive programming. This theory suggests that entertainment media is used to introduce ideas and scenarios into the collective consciousness before they manifest in reality, thereby reducing psychological resistance when these events actually occur. Proponents of this theory point to numerous examples of television shows and movies that seem to anticipate real-world events with uncanny accuracy. The pilot episode of the X-Files spin-off, The Lone Gunman, which aired in March 2001, depicted a government conspiracy to crash a hijacked passenger plane into the World Trade Center. The 1981 film The Medusa Touch featured a scene of a Boeing 747 crashing into a skyscraper. The 1993 television movie Family of Spies included a scene of terrorists attacking the World Trade Center. Skeptics dismiss such correlations as mere coincidence or cherry-picked examples from thousands of hours of programming. But from an occult perspective, the mechanism of predictive programming doesn't require conscious conspiracy. Instead, it operates through what Carl Jung termed the collective unconscious, the shared psychic substrate that connects all human minds. Creative individuals, being particularly sensitive to subtle currents in the collective psyche, naturally tap into emerging patterns and possibilities, expressing them through their art before they manifest in the physical world. Whether deliberate or unconscious, the effect remains the same. Television programming serves to prepare the collective mind for future possibilities, making the impossible seem possible and the unthinkable seem inevitable. This process works through what magicians call the doctrine of signatures. the idea that symbolic representations can influence the realities they represent. Contemporary occult researcher Mitch Horowitz, author of Occult America and Mind as Builder, has provided crucial insights into how repetition and focused attention can literally reshape reality through what he calls practical occultism. While Horowitz hasn't specifically analyzed television as a ritual tool, his documented research into new thought principles and the mechanics of consciousness change offers a powerful framework for understanding how television might function as an instrument of mass influence. Horowitz's core thesis, developed through his extensive study of American metaphysical traditions, is that repeated mental focus combined with emotional engagement can produce measurable changes in both individual consciousness and external circumstances. He writes extensively about how New Thought practitioners used repetitive affirmations, visualizations, and concentrated attention to reshape their personal realities. Techniques that, when examined closely, bear striking resemblances to the mechanisms by which television programming operates. When we apply Horowitz's documented principles to television analysis, a fascinating pattern emerges. Television programming functions according to what we might call the spiritual pragmatism of repetition, Horowitz's term for how ideas become manifest through consistent mental rehearsal. When a narrative or concept is repeated frequently enough across multiple contexts and platforms, it begins to take on the quality of objective truth in the minds of those exposed to it. This isn't simply propaganda or persuasion. It's the same consciousness-shaping mechanism that Horowitz has identified in successful magical and metaphysical practices throughout American history. Consider how Horowitz describes the power of collective belief in shaping social realities. He documents how shared mental concepts, when held by enough people with sufficient emotional intensity, can influence everything from market movements to political outcomes. Television, viewed through this lens, becomes a technology for creating precisely these kinds of collective mental states on an unprecedented scale. The emotional engagement that Horowitz identifies as crucial to effective consciousness work finds its perfect expression in television programming. Shows are specifically designed to evoke strong emotional responses: fear, desire, identification, excitement, which serve as what Horowitz would recognize as the energy source for the reality-shaping process. These emotions provide the psychic fuel necessary to transform abstract ideas into felt realities, moving concepts from the realm of possibility into lived experience. Horowitz's research into how New Thought practitioners gradually shifted social attitudes towards success, prosperity, and personal transformation provides a template for understanding television's role in broader cultural change. Just as those early metaphysical practitioners used repetitive mental techniques to normalize previously unthinkable possibilities, television programming has gradually shifted social boundaries around countless issues through repetitive exposure in dramatic contexts. The process operates independently of conscious intention, which aligns with Horowitz's observations about how metaphysical principles work regardless of whether practitioners fully understand the mechanisms involved. Even when television content is created purely for entertainment purposes, it still functions according to the consciousness-shaping principles that Horowitz has identified in his historical research. The sheer power of repetitive exposure, combined with emotional engagement, gradually reshapes the collective imagination. This application of Horowitz's documented principles suggests that television represents an evolution of the same fundamental techniques that American metaphysical traditions have used for over a century, but scaled up to influence entire populations rather than individual practitioners. The medium has become the message, in McLuhan's famous phrase, but the message is encoded in the ancient language of repetition, symbol, and emotional resonance that Horowitz has shown to be the foundation of practical consciousness work. To fully understand television's function as a divinatory tool, we must examine the specific technological mechanisms through which it induces altered states of consciousness. You see, television doesn't simply present information. It actively alters the neurological state of viewers, creating conditions that have been recognized by spiritual traditions for millennia as conducive to psychic perception and consciousness expansion. The most fundamental aspect of this process is the frequency at which television images are refreshed. In the era of cathode ray tube televisions, images were redrawn 30 times per second, creating a subtle flicker that occurred just below the threshold of conscious perception. This flicker rate corresponds closely to the brain's alpha wave frequency, the state associated with relaxed awareness, creativity, and receptivity to suggestion. Now, modern flat-screen televisions operate at higher refresh rates, but they still produce subtle rhythmic patterns that can influence brainwave activity. The combination of these technological rhythms with carefully designed programming content creates what neuroscientists call audio-visual entrainment, the synchronization of brain activity with external stimuli. This entrainment effect is enhanced by television's use of rapid editing, changing camera angles, and dynamic visual effects. These techniques, originally developed to hold viewer attention in an increasingly crowded media landscape, have the unintended consequence of further altering consciousness by preventing the normal patterns of focused attention that characterize ordinary waking awareness. The result is a state that bears striking similarities to what anthropologists have documented in traditional shamanic practices. A light trance state in which the boundary between self and environment becomes permeable, and the conscious mind becomes more receptive to symbolic and archetypal information. In this state, television programming doesn't simply convey information, it directly imprints patterns and possibilities into the viewer's consciousness, operating more like an oracle or divination system than a simple communication medium. Television programming operates through a symbolic language that speaks directly to the unconscious mind, bypassing rational analysis and embedding itself in the deeper layers of the psyche. This language consists not only of explicit symbols and images, but of archetypal patterns that resonate with fundamental structures of human consciousness. Consider the basic formats that dominate television programming: the hero's journey in dramatic series, the ritual combat of sporting events, the symbolic resolution of conflicts in legal and medical dramas, the domestic rituals of family sitcoms. These aren't arbitrary entertainment formulas, they're expressions of deep psychological patterns that have been recognized by spiritual traditions throughout history. The hero's journey, for example, which forms the basic structure of countless television dramas, mirrors the initiatory process described in mystery traditions around the world. The protagonist faces challenges, undergoes transformation, and emerges with new wisdom or power. By repeatedly exposing viewers to this pattern, television programming reinforces certain beliefs about personal growth, social change, and the nature of reality itself. Similarly, the adversarial format that dominates news programming, the constant presentation of conflicts, crises, and opposing viewpoints, serves to reinforce a dualistic worldview that sees reality in terms of opposing forces rather than underlying unity. This isn't necessarily conscious propaganda, but it does shape consciousness in ways that support certain social and political structures while discouraging others. The commercial breaks that punctuate television programming serve their own archetypal function, creating a rhythm of desire and satisfaction that mirrors religious practices of fasting and feasting, tension and release. The promises made in advertising that products can transform identity, solve problems and fulfill desires operate according to the same psychological principles that underlie magical thinking and religious faith. One of the most mysterious aspects of television's oracular function is its apparent ability to anticipate future events through fictional programming. This phenomenon extends beyond the specific examples cited by predictive programming theorists to encompass a broader pattern of fictional narratives that seem to prefigure real-world developments. The science fiction genre has been particularly rich in such apparent prophecies. Star Trek anticipated personal computers, cell phones, and satellite communication decades before they became commonplace. The Twilight Zone explored themes of surveillance, social control, and technological alienation that would become central concerns of the digital age. Black Mirror has provided startlingly accurate previews of social media's psychological effects and the potential dark sides of technological advancement. From an occult perspective, this prophetic function doesn't require supernatural intervention or conscious conspiracy. Instead, it emerges from the same source that has always fed prophetic vision, the ability of sensitive individuals to perceive subtle patterns and emerging possibilities in the collective unconscious. Television writers and producers, like artists and visionaries throughout history, often work in a state of inspired creativity that taps into deeper currents of cultural and historical development. In this state, they naturally express the fears, hopes and potentials that exist in embryonic form within the collective psyche, giving them concrete dramatic expression before they manifest in the physical world. This process is amplified by television's massive reach and cultural influence. When millions of people absorb these fictional scenarios, they don't simply forget them after the program ends. Instead, these images and narratives become part of the collective imagination, creating a kind of cultural software that influences how people interpret events and possibilities. In this way, television fiction doesn't just predict the future, it participates in creating it. By the 1960s and 70s, television had achieved something truly unprecedented in human history. The establishment of a technological altar in, well, virtually every home in the developed world. These altars operated continuously, broadcasting a steady stream of images, narratives, and symbolic content that over time gradually reshaped the consciousness of entire populations. Unlike traditional religious or magical practices, which required active participation and conscious intention, television's influence operated largely below the threshold of awareness. Families gathered around their sets not for conscious ritual purposes, but really just for entertainment and information. Yet the effect was essentially ritualistic. The regular synchronization of attention, the repeated exposure to symbolic content, and the gradual conditioning of beliefs and expectations. The programming schedules that governed television broadcasting reflected this ritual function. Primetime programming, morning news shows, weekend sports, late-night talk shows, these weren't random arrangements, but carefully designed rhythms that aligned with natural human cycles of attention, energy, and receptivity. Like traditional liturgical calendars, television schedules created a temporal framework that organized collective consciousness according to artificial but, powerful patterns. The content of this programming served multiple functions simultaneously. On the surface, it provided entertainment, information, and cultural cohesion, but at deeper levels, it operated as a form of continuous initiation, gradually introducing viewers to new ideas, values, and ways of perceiving reality. This process was particularly powerful for children who absorbed television programming during their most formative years, when their fundamental beliefs about reality were still being established. As television broadcasting networks expanded and interconnected, they began to function as a kind of technological nervous system for human civilization. Information could flow instantly from any point in the network to every other point, creating feedback loops and resonance patterns that, amplified certain types of content while suppressing others. This network effect transformed television from a simple broadcasting medium into something approaching a collective mind. Events that received television coverage became real in a way that events without such coverage did not. Problems that attracted media attention received resources and solutions, while problems that remained invisible to television remained invisible to society as a whole. The gatekeepers of this system, network executives, producers, editors and advertisers, thus wielded a form of power that previous civilizations would have associated with priesthoods or oracles. They could determine which stories would be told, which voices would be heard, and which version of reality would be presented to the masses. This wasn't necessarily conscious manipulation, but it was undeniably a form of technological shamanism, with vast implications for the direction of human consciousness and civilization. The commercialization of television broadcasting added another layer to this influence. The need to attract and hold viewer attention created evolutionary pressure for programming that would trigger strong emotional and psychological responses. Over time, this led to the development of increasingly sophisticated techniques for capturing and directing human attention. Techniques that bore striking resemblances to methods used in traditional magical and hypnotic practices. As we examine television's function as a technological oracle, we inevitably encounter fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness itself. Does television simply reflect existing patterns in human consciousness, or does it actively shape and create new ones? Is the apparent prophetic function of television programming evidence of genuine precognitive abilities, or simply the natural result of creative minds exploring possibilities that already exist in potential form? From the perspective of consciousness researchers like Rupert Sheldrake and his theory of morphic resonance, television might function as a medium for transmitting what he calls morphogenetic fields, patterns of organization and behavior that exist independently of individual minds but influence the development of consciousness across populations. In this framework, television programming both draws from and contributes to these collective patterns, creating a feedback loop between individual and collective consciousness. Contemporary neuroscience offers additional insights into television's consciousness-altering effects. Research has shown that television watching activates the brain's mirror neuron systems, causing viewers to neurologically simulate the experiences of characters they observe. This means that television programming doesn't just provide information about different ways of living, it actually gives viewers the neurological experience of living those ways, at least in simulation. The implications of this research extend far beyond entertainment. If television can literally rewire neural pathways and alter the fundamental structures of consciousness, then its role in human development may be far more significant than previously understood. Rather than simply reflecting culture, television may be actively participating in the evolution of human consciousness itself. The transition from broadcast television to digital and streaming media has amplified many of television's oracular functions while adding new dimensions of influence and control. The shift from passive consumption to interactive engagement has created new opportunities for psychological conditioning and behavioral modification, while the use of algorithmic curation has made the system's ability to shape individual consciousness far more sophisticated and personalized. Modern streaming platforms use artificial intelligence to analyze viewing patterns, predicting and influencing future choices with, honestly, unprecedented precision. This represents an evolution from television's original function as a mass ritual medium to something approaching individualized ceremonial magic, a system that can craft unique consciousness-altering experiences for each viewer based on their psychological profile and behavioral history. The proliferation of screens and devices has also intensified television's influence by making it omnipresent rather than confined to specific times and places. The ritualistic gathering around a single family television has been replaced by continuous, personalized exposure through smartphones, tablets, laptops, and other devices. This shift has created what media theorists call ambient media, a continuous background influence that operates below the threshold of conscious awareness. As we advance deeper into the digital age, Television's function as a technological oracle continues to evolve and intensify. The fundamental mechanisms that made television a powerful tool for shaping consciousness, repetition, emotional engagement, synchronized attention, and symbolic programming, remain active in new and increasingly sophisticated forms. Whether we understand television as entertainment, propaganda, or technological divination may ultimately be less important than recognizing its profound influence on human consciousness and society. Like the oracles of ancient civilizations, television speaks in symbols and narratives that shape not only individual beliefs, but the collective reality in which we all live. The question that remains is whether we will learn to approach this powerful technology with the wisdom and discernment that previous generations applied to their spiritual and divinatory practices, or whether we will continue to absorb its influence unconsciously, allowing it to shape our consciousness and destiny without our participation or consent. In the glowing light of countless screens, the oracle continues to speak, weaving its electronic dreams into the fabric of human reality. What prophecies it offers and how we choose to interpret them may determine not only our individual futures, but the fate of consciousness itself in an age of technological transformation. The television remains what it has always been, a mirror that reflects not just what we are, but what we might become. In its flickering light, we glimpse both our highest aspirations and our deepest fears, encoded in the endless stream of images and narratives that pour forth from the oracle box that has become the altar of our age. If this exploration into the hidden dimensions of television and media has opened your eyes to new possibilities, if you've felt that spark of recognition as these ideas connected with your own observations about the strange power of the screen, then you've experienced something that goes beyond mere intellectual understanding. You've touched upon the living reality of how consciousness and technology interweave in ways that ancient wisdom traditions would have recognized as magical. This journey into the occult functions of media is far from over. There are deeper layers to explore, more connections to uncover, and greater mysteries to investigate. The oracle box continues to evolve, and our understanding of its influence must evolve as well. If you're ready to continue this investigation into the hidden mechanisms that shape our reality, to explore how ancient wisdom applies to modern technology, and to develop the discernment necessary to navigate an increasingly complex media landscape, then join our growing community of conscious observers. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell to ensure you never miss our latest explorations into the intersection of consciousness, technology, and the hidden forces that influence our world. Like this video, if it resonated with you, your engagement helps us reach others who are ready to look behind the screen and see the deeper patterns at work in our digital age. Share it with those who might benefit from this perspective, because understanding these mechanisms is not just an individual pursuit, but a collective necessity for anyone seeking to maintain conscious awareness in an age of technological enchantment. The oracle speaks, but wisdom lies in learning how to listen with discernment. Together, we can develop that wisdom and share it with others who are ready to see beyond the flickering surface to the profound forces beneath.